Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. We pray that you'll bless our time together. As we look at some difficult topics, pray that you will help us to put to use the information that we share today. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. Well, sorry for the little bit of a late start. As you know, there's always a lot of things going on. So today I'm going to call this Operation Disinformation. We live at a very unique time. So let me just give you a little bit of a heads up what I'm going to be doing this week. You can get us, by the way, on different platforms. We're on YouTube. I saw another friend of mine who has a YouTube channel. They just finally said, we're done with it. It's just not worth the hassle anymore. And it's Michael Lake. He's leaving YouTube. I'll be on, I think I'm doing a show with him and Mike Spalding a week from tomorrow on the 14th. That's sometime in the afternoon, 3 or 4 o'clock. Then, so he's just moving to Rumble. A lot of people are moving to their own apps. YouTube's come out with some more restrictions this week about things that you can't talk about, even though they have nothing to do with the United States. But it's part of this big control thing, and and that's why I'm calling this Operation Disinformation. But you can get us on YouTube for right now. You can also get us on Rumble at Real FBC. That's all one word, Real FBC. And we've been getting more views there, so that's good. Sometimes, for me personally, on my phone, Rumble just does not work that well. I get a lot of something went wrong messages when I'm trying to watch something. I think there's a couple other platforms we're on. We're also on RTN TV. That's usually uploaded on Sunday. And you can also follow us. We stream this live on Facebook, on the Fellowship Bible Chapel Facebook page. Also at our app, Fellowship Bible Chapel. You can get that. And I think at some point there's a number of topics that I just don't talk about because of the YouTube thing, and we want to keep our sermons and Bible teachings up on YouTube, so I avoid those. I usually stream live during the week when I do a midweek update to YouTube, just because I haven't figured out the whole Rumble and app thing yet. I'm working on it, and we're still trying to get an audio podcast up. We're going to try to get that done in the next week or two. I will also Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Remember, the time changed. I saw a thing about, how do you change time here, and it said your phone, it'll do it automatically. Your microwave and oven, just forget about it and learn to live with it till the time changes back again in the spring. And I forget what I was talking about. What was I talking about? Oh, Thursday with David Fiorazzo on Stand Up for the Truth, Q95FM.com, Q95FM.com. And we will talk about the elections, and because that's one of the things we're going to talk about. But again, some of the things we talk about, this is sort of the grid that I use. Everything seems to be happening at the same time. But there's also a logistics component, and I've talked a lot about that, particularly with the Israeli gas. Some are of the view that this is the hook in the jaw that will bring Russia, or the people that come, maybe Russia, could be Russia, looks like Russia, from the north, to drag them in, because Russia wants Israeli gas. Now Russia has, 400 times the amount of gas that Israel does on Israel's best day, at least that we know of so far. But the problem with the Israeli gas is there's just not a good logistical way to get it to Europe right now. They are sending some to Egypt, where it's liquefied and shipped by tanker to Europe, but Europe doesn't have enough facilities to offload the gas. They have ships backing up there. So that's a logistical thing. Same way we always talk about Ezekiel 38:39 war, and I think that's a little bit further off just because of the logistical thing. Russia has not done well in Ukraine. And to think that Russia's going to magically turn everything around, and they have supply chain issues, supply issues, logistical issues in Ukraine, add 1,000 miles to that. I mean, they border on Ukraine, but add 1,000 miles and some of the tallest mountains on Earth in the Caucasus, it's very difficult to do. And Russia does not have a good naval shipping system to transport things. And most of their transport for troops is by rail. And they don't really have a rail connection to the Middle East. So now it's possible they could develop something with Iran, and they've been working on that. But again, it's not that I don't think these things are going to happen. I think we have to look at the logistical aspect. And then, as I always say in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, you'll get this understanding. And I mentioned this, maybe I'll come back to this one. 2 Timothy chapter 3, we talked about this last week with this whole LGBTQ transgender thing and all these things. And people believe these myths that, like you're not what you're born, and you can change that. And you can change that and still have children. I mean, there's just all these lies that people are taught and they believe. And I think the fact that so many of them are happening at the same time is an indication that it's going to be difficult. So let me look at a few things. I'm going to look at some economic things. I'm going to look at some political things. We'll look at a little bit about Ukraine, Israeli elections, and a few things like that, and then we'll be out of here before this evening. It won't be that long. So here's a thing. The real estate market has been very good for people, but it's not doing well right now. This is a big article in the real estate section of this morning's New York Times, and that it's worse than you imagine. I was talking to someone, and I'm going to apologize if I've talked about this before, because when I do a midweek update, it's always interesting. People write to me and say, hey, you really need to talk about this. And I'm like, well, I talked about that last Sunday. So I know you didn't listen. But then again, I need to be gracious and do that. And because sometimes I say, I think I talked about that, but I don't remember. So if I don't remember what I talked about, I can't expect you to remember what I talked about. So we'll all get through everything eventually. And we have an attorney and having to talk about it as if it's going to matter at that point in time anyway. But was talking to someone this week, I think someone called who listens to the update, mentioned that they had a adult child that worked in the oil industry. And in the city where this person worked, this is one of the major oil companies, I won't name the name, they had a 20-story building that was occupied by their people, and just this one city. After COVID and the lockdowns and everything, they had got that down to less than 2 floors out of 20. Now, so I've done a lot of commercial real estate, legal work over the years, foreclosures, workouts, that sort of thing. So I know a little bit about the market. I can tell you that kind of demand destruction, and I don't know how else to describe it, across the board, just as a general rule, demand for office space and that type of thing is down 30%. But because of the way the banking rules have allowed companies to get away with it, banks and others, that's not been priced into the market. So when you see a major oil company in one city, they go from 20 floors to 2. I could take you down, I know where there are major law firms that used to have 2 floors of some of the big buildings in downtown Columbus. They have less than half a floor now. That's not been priced into the market. And at some point, it's going to hit. I do not know when. I talk to my banking friends about it all the time, and they're sort of surprised that it has not hit. And now it's hitting the home markets as well. As demand goes down, prices are going down. Some places demand is still up. They're still building homes like crazy around here because of the big Intel plants. the big Intel plant that's being built out there near New Albany. I'm hearing, I don't know if it's either 80,000 people they're expecting eventually to be employed there, or 80,000 new homes that they need. It's an incredible, I mean, it's great for here. And I see real estate being sold, and I know the people who are buying it, and I know they're going to do home development. I mean, I know a little bit about what's going on. And so that helps us a little bit here, but around the country in a lot of places, I hear from realtors in California and elsewhere, and they just said it's brutal out there right now. People cannot, with the increase in interest rates, cannot afford to buy homes. So that's a big driver. That's been a big, plus in the economy recently. This was last week. $500 billion was knocked off the valuation of some of the big tech companies, Amazon, Google, Meta, or Facebook. Facebook is down 70% this year. Now, the advantage of that is that the head of Facebook, the founder of Facebook, has less money to invest in the elections this year, like he did 2 years ago. $430 million in certain states. There's some books that have been written about this. And so the elections are coming up, and the president came out and he did a speech this week, and he's like, it takes time to count votes. Now, I voted in my first presidential election 50 years ago this week. Nixon versus McGovern. You remember that one? What did McGovern get? One state? And it might have been Hawaii. It wasn't much. He was just literally destroyed in the election. And this was in the middle of the Vietnam War, and we're going to stay in Vietnam. And I had a pretty high draft number in 1972. But then the draft stopped shortly after the election. So this is just, but now everybody's coming out. So the other morning I get up and I pop open my Twitter account, and there it is. It takes time to count all of the votes. Now, I don't remember this in my lifetime, taking a lot of time to count the votes. Who was it? Hugh Hewitt, I think, wrote a book. He said, you need to win beyond the margin of cheat. And I think that was pretty accurate. And so here comes the complaint was they just kept counting votes. Remember that 2 years ago? And now the president comes out and says, it's going to take time. You got to get all those mail-in ballots and everything in. It takes time to count them. You notice he didn't mention authenticate them, make sure they're valid, that sort of thing. So we're 2 days away, less than 2 days away now from the voting. I voted early. So I don't need to worry about it, but goodness, I don't know if you're like me. I get phone calls all the time from, in fact, I better shut off my ringer. So fortunately, I came home yesterday. This is what happens when you get old. Couldn't find my phone. Came home from playing golf, and I'm like, where's my phone? Where's my phone? So Pam dialed it. And somehow I'd thrown it in the washing machine with my golf towel or something. So it was in there ringing. So, hey, stuff happens. So this is one of these things. You see these protests all over the world, these oil protesters. They throw oil, paint, food coloring, that type of thing on these priceless works of art. Then they glue themselves to the wall. Now, my thinking is fix the painting and let them sit there glued to the wall for 3 months. No bathroom breaks or anything. Then we'll see if they continue to do it. Who knows? Now, this was sort of in the UK. Liz Truss came out and she said, we're going to do fracking. We're going to frack. We're going to go get more gas and oil. And what happened? 45 days, she's gone. And now Sunak comes in who is a Hindu, and they even have the Church of England is celebrating Diwali, which I guess is a Hindu holiday. The Archbishop of Canterbury was celebrating Diwali. I thought the Church of England gave at least lip service to being a Christian denomination, but I've talked about this a lot over the years, the incorporation of Eastern mysticism and that type of thing into evangelicalism. It's a problem. So here Sunak comes in and he's like, okay, we're done with fracking. So I sort of think that there were some people that were a little bit upset with Liz Truss, even though, I don't live there, so I wasn't a huge fan of hers, but they got what they wanted, no fracking. We'll talk a little bit more about the environmental thing. And this kind of goes a little bit to the disinformation thing that we're in. So you hear all these things. I'll just to back up a second and remind you. Last year, and I'm preparing a longer talk on this for a conference I'm doing in Canada in late April, early May next year in Calgary, Last Days Bible Conference. Last year, it was last July, the FBI tweeted out that they were going after domestic terrorists, white supremacists. And what they did was I recognized the picture in the tweet. It was the picture, showed planes that were getting ready to fly into buildings. They took it from the Muslim terrorist PDF that they'd put out about 2019. And now they're saying it applies to domestic people. Now, I haven't seen anybody flying any airplanes into anything. I haven't seen anybody driving anything into anything that would be on the political right. So it's just, but the whole thing is a psychological operation to get you to think that everybody that disagrees with us is a terrorist. And it's, in my view, it's criminal. And so that's why, and you see the president's been doing it. They started, the Department of Homeland Security mission is completely changed to domestic disinformation, misinformation, malinformation. You remember they hired that lady, Nina Jankowicz, who liked to sing these show tunes in her spare time. And so we referred to her as Scary Poppins and the propaganda nanny. She never took office, but that nothing changed. Again, that was like a psychological operation to get us not to pay attention to the fact that they fired her or that she didn't assume her position. It was a psychological operation to just think like, well, everything's okay. They're backing off of this, and they have not backed down. They've ratcheted it down even more. Now, this is kind of an interesting article from this morning's Sunday Times in the UK. The global hacking network that targets VIPs. Now, if you were what people overseas will call real football, soccer, we call soccer, they're having the World Cup starting in Qatar in a couple of weeks, I think. Well, Qatar is a radical Muslim Brotherhood country. I mean, it's not free. And there's article after article that's out about how badly they treat their workers. And if someone is of a certain sexual persuasion, it's brutal. It's way beyond anything that happens here in the United States. Even though they would let you believe that it happens that way in the United States, it doesn't happen that way in the United States. But they're using an Indian gang, using Qatar to go after people who have criticized Qatar. So I'll probably get hacked now if Qatar cares. And it's a Muslim Brotherhood-oriented place. So when you see the head of Hamas in Gaza, he lives in Qatar. You know, the guy that has the perfectly groomed beard. His last name begins with an N. Can't remember it right off the top of my head. I can't remember where I put my phone, so I'm not going to remember this guy's name. But this guy must be in a barber's chair every day. getting this thing groomed. I mean, there's just no way that he's not. Well, he lives in Qatar. He doesn't live in Gaza. He lives in Qatar. Occasionally he'll go visit people, Hezbollah up in Lebanon and that type of thing, compatriots. He'll go to Iran. But he's rarely, it's probably been years since he's been in Gaza, to my knowledge. But so what Qatar's doing is they're going after people that are criticizing them for bad work conditions and that type of thing. Listen to what this article says. It says this: private investigators linked to the City of London. And that's kind of an interesting entity, the City of London. It's like separate and apart from London. Are using an India-based computer hacking gang to target British businesses, government officials, and journalists. The Sunday Times and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism have been given access to the gang's database, which reveals the extraordinary scale of the attacks. It shows that the criminals targeted the private email accounts of more than 100 victims on behalf of investigators working for autocratic states, British lawyers, and their wealthy clients. Critics of Qatar, who threatened to expose wrongdoing by the Gulf state in the run-up to this month's World Cup, were among those hacked. It is the first time the inner workings of a major hack-for-hire gang have been leaked to the media, and it reveals multiple criminal conspiracies. Some of the hackers' clients are private investigators used by big law firms with bases in the City of London. Now listen, the UK, the Times of London, is not a right-wing publication by any stretch of the imagination. I like it just because it gives me a lot of information that I can sift through and go find other sources. But listen to this. The commissioning of hacking is a criminal offense punishable with a maximum sentence of 10 years in jail in Britain. The Metropolitan Police was tipped off about the allegations regarding Qatar in October last year, yet chose not to take any action. David Davis, the former cabinet minister, said that the force should reopen its investigation into the cyber attacks against British citizens. Davis said the investigation exposed how London has become the global center of hacking. He added, it paints a grim picture of a network of criminal hackers that threatens justice and privacy here in the UK and abroad. And what you're going to find when you look into this, if you read this article, you'll find that Middle Eastern countries are involved in this, like United Arab Emirates. And we think, oh, well, they've got this big, beautiful commercial city. They're all about freedom. They're part of the Abraham Accords. So what are we worried about, right? But my concern with the Abraham Accords, aside from the group of people that are joining in on it that seem to be related to the nations or groups listed in Psalm 83, is that there's a very heavy economic component to it. Oh, it's all about the economics. And I'm telling you that someday there is a coming world ruler who will be all about the economics. And he will make it difficult for people to participate in world economics unless they have a certain mark. So this is very concerning. So if you can get your hands on that, it may or may not be behind a paywall. Go to the Sunday Times today. Times.co.uk, I think is the website address, and read that article because it's a fascinating thing as to what they've uncovered. But you need to understand it's going on here. Same thing. All the disinformation, it was Putin interfered with the election and that type of thing. And by the way, there were people who used, before 2020, there was a certain political party in the United States that used the Electoral Counting Act of like 1885 many, many, many times to challenge electors that came from certain states. Did you know this? Did they tell you this? You can dig it out. I mean, there's just dig around. You can find the mashup videos about this. The Wall Street Journal has a great article. This was in Friday's Wall Street Journal, the messy unwinding of the New World Order. So we always talk about the New World Order, and that's sort of become a common thing that's referred to in Bible prophecy circles, but it's falling apart in some respects. But there's a new world order coming behind it. And exactly what that looks like, don't know. And it may be a multipolar world. It may be a regional world. I was mentioning to someone yesterday, my friend Bill Koenig has written a book, Eye to Eye, and John McTernan wrote a book, and Bill and John McTernan wrote a book. Bill Koenig and John McTernan wrote a book before that about how when we, as the United States, try to divide the land of Israel or push for the division of the land of Israel, stuff happens here in the United States. The most famous one being when Bush 41 was in Madrid for a peace conference, a Madrid conference to help divide up the land of Israel or direct the dividing up of the land of Israel. That day, the perfect storm, the one that led to the movie, The Perfect Storm, 100-foot waves, a cold water hurricane that went backwards from the usual direction, just about destroyed the Bush family compound in Kennebunkport, Maine. It happens all the time. Katrina happened when we were pushing Israel out of Gaza, pushing Israel to get out of Gaza, abandon Gaza. It happens over and over again. It was interesting when I was working once. I was in D.C. It was on September 13th and 14th, 1993. On September 13th, 1993, they had a big meeting on the White House lawn. 3,000 people, that's kind of an interesting number, 3,000 witnesses, were there at the White House for the signing of the Oslo Accords. Remember, that's where Bill Clinton pushed Rabin and Arafat to shake hands. And that was to divide up the land of Israel. That was a beginning of a process. It's very interesting. I didn't think of it till yesterday. The next morning, I got done early, and I thought, well, I'm going to go down to the House office building, and I'm going to go to the opening. I'm kind of geeky this way. Go to the hearings on NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. That was the next morning. So here we are pushing Israel to divide the land on Monday, and the next morning, we're sort of dividing up our land and turning it into a regional thing, and that continues to today. And so there are some that think the Club of Rome division of the regions are part of what happens in the end times. Time will tell whether that's how it works out, but certainly that's what occurred. So we divide the land. Next day, we're dividing up our own freedom. I think there's a direct connection. So back to this Wall Street Journal article, they talk about how we kind of got into the New World Order, how it's kind of gone into an area of disorder with supply chain disruptions, and then we have the disorder, and you can see all these things, these indicators that happen. Everything is sort of collapsing right now. I mean, everywhere you look, things are not going that well. For example, here's a thing. Now, this has been a lot of stories about the U.S. diesel shortage. Supplies are dwindling ahead of winter. Now, I've seen good, solid thinking people on YouTube videos who say it's not that bad. There's the same supply that there was before. But part of the problem is the distribution. They're already rationing in certain areas. I've seen a lot of videos. A guy, I think it was North Carolina or Tennessee, he pulled into a couple gas stations and all the diesel pumps had that yellow out of order hood on the diesel pumps. I have a friend, he has a friend who has a gas station. It's not a branded gas station, but he gets his diesel fuel from a big refinery. I won't say the name. They're only sending diesel fuel now to company-branded gas stations. And they're saying that his ability to get diesel could last for months. Or his inability, to get diesel could last for months. That has an impact. I mean, everything is diesel. I was talking to someone who uses diesel. Bought enough this year to do his operations in his business, but he says, I have no idea whether I'm going to get diesel next year or not. I just don't know. I have enough to get through, he's a farmer, I have enough to get through my harvest, but I don't know whether I have any hope of getting diesel next year. Some say I will, some say I won't. And so there's a lot of uncertainty that's built into the market. I've talked about this too, that Europe is sort of in a category of deindustrialization. As they're not being able to get natural gas, they have plants shutting down, fertilizer plants. Every fertilizer plant in Poland is shut down. And Poland's an agricultural country. In other places across Europe, fertilizer production is down 70% from what it was last year. 70%. Well, how does that relate? What happens to the Netherlands? Remember, they used to have all of these windmills to keep pumping waters because 70% of the Netherlands or so is under sea level. What happens when they don't have natural gas to run the pumps and the hydraulic gates that they have? Now they've had, by the way, Europe's in a sort of like we are here. It's dry. It's unseasonably warm, so that's helping them get through this gas crisis. It may actually help them get through this winter. But then everybody I'm reading says, what about next winter? I mean, you got things filled up before the gas supply was cut off this year, but now the gas supply is largely cut off, at least 40% of it. What are you going to do to fill these things up next year? And so the food crisis likely won't be this year. It'll be next year or the year after. That's when it will really hit, if it hits. And we pray that it doesn't. Part of the problem is natural gas. There's a thing called the Haber-Bosch process to make fertilizer, and the seeds need this kind of ammonium, nitrogen to sort of germinate and produce the right way. So when you cut 70% of that supply, what are you going to do? You're going to cut back. Then only countries that can afford the higher prices, because there's supply and demand, there's less supply, prices go up. Because the demand stays. Most people I know eat about every day, sometimes more. Even the people who are doing intermittent fasting eat every day. But what happens when this food supply is cut in half? And so this Haber-Bosch, when you examine what scientists say about it, they say that about half of food production in the world is dependent on this process. Well, if you take the natural gas component out and you're not producing the fertilizer, all of a sudden you've got a process that accounts for feeding half the world that doesn't exist anymore or isn't being used to the extent that it was. And when you start running those numbers, because it leads to famine, and we know what famines lead to, you're talking stuff that sounds a lot like what you read about in the book of Revelation. Worldwide famine and that sort of thing. So we're coming up on the elections. So this is the, and so everywhere you look, this is from the Financial Times. Biden must tackle media and voters' concerns to safeguard democracy. Everything is, we've got to protect democracy. Now, I've got a few clips of things here because I think this fits all together. And it's like, they're going to vote to destroy democracy. Well, wait a minute. You vote in democracy, so how do you're voting? And so this narrative is going on, and you're seeing a parallel narrative in Israel right now, because, and I'll talk about the Israeli elections in a minute, it works. And so here's from the Times of London today. U.S. democracy itself is on the ballot in these momentous midterms. Defeated Bolsonaro, brooded and plotted for 2 days, and may yet have designs on clinging to power. But you're not allowed to talk about that election. So I'm not talking about that election. You can go find it and read about it. Here's an editorial from this morning's New York Times. Political violence is threatening our democracy. Now, I've been around. I have not seen it. I mean, if you have, let me know. I saw plenty of violence a couple of years ago in a lot of cities, and nothing happened to those people. by and large. So I was, and I talked about it on my midweek update, I was at somehow I got invited to the Fox News panel, Martha McCallum's show, The Story with Martha McCallum, and Brett Baer from Special Report came in, and they were going to do the moderation of the J.D. Vance, Tim Ryan debate for Ohio Senate. And so I signed up for the debate, and then I get an email from Martha's producer, and she says, hey, do you want to be on a small panel a couple hours before the debate? So I struggled and overcame my innate shyness and said, sure, I'll do that, you know. And so I went down, and by the way, I have washed that shirt since I have a couple of them, just so in case you wonder. So I'm going to play about a 5-minute clip of this, not so much because I'm in it, but because I want you to see what people were really thinking. It was interesting. It was about a 50-50 panel. And, you know, we talked, and it was pretty clear. Almost all of the people on the conservative side were Christians, evangelical Christians. Some of them, we'd gone to the same church for many years. So there was a lot of connection there, and there was a young guy, you'll see him talk, from Cedarville, but then there were people on the left. So you will see I actually am able to exercise restraint, as the one lady was talking about abortion. The young lady sitting right behind me. So here's the clip.
All righty, well, this is exciting. We are in Columbus, Ohio. It's great to be on the road and great to be alongside Brett Baer. And we have a preview of tonight's town hall here in Ohio. We're speaking with some of the voters who will be in the audience with us tonight.
Yeah, what do they want to hear from the Senate candidates? Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan, Republican J.D. Vance. Thank you all for coming early. You're the warm-up act here.
Tim Ryan has spent his entire career really fighting for the people of Ohio, working to bring jobs to our state, working to make sure that, you know, we bring good-paying union jobs to our state, something that we desperately need. And there's no better way to, I think, look at that than the clean energy revolution. We're talking about the opportunity to take action on climate change and bring jobs and investment into our state. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance is coming back from California, where he spent most of his adult life working with millionaires, not working for the people of Ohio. And he's saying that there is no climate crisis. We don't need this investment. We don't need the Inflation Reduction Act in Ohio. I find that hard to believe when we have thousands of jobs coming to our state, good-paying union jobs in Toledo, Youngstown, in electric vehicle manufacturing, in solar manufacturing, and battery manufacturing for electric vehicles. J.D. Vance will not deliver those jobs, but Tim Ryan has shown time and time again that he's going to go to the Senate and he's going to fight for Ohioans, not for the Democratic Party and not for the Republican Party.
All right, there's a mix of people here. John, you're a Vance supporter, is that fair?
I am.
And why is that?
I think that one of the things that I'm concerned about is what we've seen under what I call the Biden administration, because of the influence of the first 2 terms of Obama, is really what has been kind of a controlled destruction of large parts of our economy. First with the shutdowns under COVID, and then with the rules that were enacted the day that Joe Biden came into office to shut down drilling, fracking, and that type of thing. And now we have a major energy crisis around the world, and that's leading to a food crisis. We are in serious, serious trouble. So when I look at the 2 candidates, I know Tim Ryan won't help, but I think J.D. Vance will.
How many of you would like to see more fracking in Ohio, more tapping into the natural gas resources? 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe. And you agree?
Half.
You know, so tell me a little bit about why you think that fracking is needed at this point. Go ahead.
I mean, I think it's important that we're energy independent. I mean, under the Trump administration, regardless of what you think about Trump, we were energy independent. We were exporting oil. Gas prices were low. I mean, $1.50 lower. I keep track of how much gas I purchase. I was paying $1 more per gallon this past summer over the last summer. And I think it's also important, though, that, you know, this election isn't just about the economy. I think we are kind of forgetting about the last election in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin. I think social issues, like what's being taught in our classrooms, those are all really important issues in Ohio still too. The economy. I work at a grocery store. People are coming into the store. They're paying $50, $100 more per visit than they were in the past years, and that's also a problem. And so, the economy is important, and we've spent a ton of money as a government, but there's a lot of issues that I think we need to be paying attention to.
Sophie, you're a student at Ohio State. How much do you think, to mention social issues, the issue of abortion affects things for you and for this
Here
state?
comes my poker face.
For me personally, I think that it affects me greatly. I am a pro-choice woman in the state of Ohio, and it is a right that I think I will probably never need to take advantage of, but it's a right that all women should be able to have the choice to be able to make.
So it's driving your vote or a factor in your vote?
It certainly is, and there are several other factors, I think, but abortion is definitely one that'll drive it.
So right now, I believe in Ohio, abortion is legal up to 22 weeks.
Oh, that it does affect us? That it's going to change? Yeah, I think so. J.D. Vance has said that he does not believe in the reproductive rights for women, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And Tim Ryan has. I think he believes that women, reproductive decision should be between a woman and their doctor.
By the way, the lady there on the right, very conservative. Just so you...
And I think Ohio is headed in a direction where they're going to ban abortion completely.
Jeff?
I don't think it's a factor in this race. The opposition has just stated that it's a state right. J.D. Vance, being a senator, is not a policy you could affect from that. It's just a state issue that goes to the state legislature and the state senate. So I don't think this election for the Senate impacts it.
You look like you'd like to say something now. Go ahead.
I'm a woman living in Ohio, and
Lived about
the
2 blocks
suppression
away for
of
30
women
years.
and our bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom has large repercussions in our state, economically, socially. We need women's health care, and this is 2022. We have the medical knowledge, we have the science, we have the equipment to save people and babies, and we are now not allowed to use them.
We're going to talk about this tonight, I promise you, because I can tell that it's important to a lot of you.
Hey, now listen, the Cedarville student, he got cornered by a bunch of these people till he was rescued. They were talking about abortion. They believe outright lies. They are not based on science. I'm sorry. These people are on a different planet. Now, I was going to read a passage from Matthew that talked about the wheat and tares growing together until the Lord comes for judgment. And I gave a concrete example of that. So here is a picture of last Sunday at Potter's House Church in Dallas, Texas, Pastor T.D. Jakes with Beto O'Rourke. He is a radical abortion supporter. And T.D. Jakes runs around with evangelicals or so-called evangelicals. This guy is woke. He is a wolf, and his sheep need to be rescued from him. Here's Beto O'Rourke a few years ago when he was running for president. He's asked a question about late-term abortion. And that always gets them. They're ready to, if it comes about late in the term, do a C-section. They do those all the time, right? And save the baby. They don't care about life. They are lying. This is a critical issue. And we have 75 million aborted babies in the United States since in the last 50 years at least. China, 500 million forced abortions. And we want to adopt Chinese policies. It's like, when did Moloch become the god of America and China and the world? It's happening everywhere. So here's Beto O'Rourke a few years ago.
Are you for third trimester abortion?
You need to turn this one up.
Are you going to protect the life?
So let me back it up and here we go.
Are you for third trimester abortions, or are you going to protect the lives of third trimester babies? Because, there's really not a medical necessity for abortion. It's not a medical emergency procedure because typically third trimester abortions take up to 3 days to have. So you would, in that sense, if there was an emergency, the doctors would just do a C-section and you don't have to kill the baby in that essence. So are you for or against third trimester abortions?
So the question is about abortion and reproductive rights. And my answer to you is that should be a decision that the woman makes about her own body. I trust her.
Okay. And that's what some of these ladies, 3 of the ladies on that panel that I was on the other day said. Let the woman decide. So last Sunday, let's go to another church, another wolf pastors is Creflo Dollar at World Changers Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And here's what happened at his church last Sunday.
Thank you so much for being here. Right before you take your seat, I just want to say this because I want to see how it sounds. Governor Stacey Abrams just walked in. So you already know what to do, right? How many of you have already done it? Wow. That's big time. Make it happen. Do what you got to do, and we're honored to have you here with us this morning. Amen.
Stacey Abrams has claimed that an election years ago was stolen from her. She just lost the court case, by the way. Do they ever call her an election denier? Ever? I see her on MSNBC all the time. She writes soft porn novels. Those romance novels for women. I've heard some of it read that you could read on the air. Tucker Carlson read them. It's unbelievable. And she goes to a church and she's praised by this guy supposedly repented of all the word faith stuff he'd been teaching over the years. You believe that now? Do you believe he repented? What's the evidence? What's the proof? Here's Stacey Abrams on a panel a couple months ago talking about heartbeat bills. You may need to turn this one up because the sound's not that good.
There is no such thing as a heartbeat at 6 weeks. It is a manufactured sound designed to convince people that men have the right to take control of a woman's body away from her.
Okay, so do you hear? So to translate what she said, the heartbeat. You've seen the videos of the heartbeat. You've heard the sounds of the heartbeat. She said that's made up by men so they can stop women from having abortions to keep them oppressed. She is. Well, you know how I feel. Here's what she talked about. Here's her view on abortion from the debate that she had with Jeff Kemp last week.
Leader Abrams, if I may, to be fair, with the question for you was, while polls show a majority of Georgians do support access to abortion rights, most also support some limits on it. What limits would you be okay with if you were governor?
Absolutely. As I have said, abortion is a medical choice. And as such, it should be that a woman has the ability to make a decision until viability. And that decision about viability should not impact her life or her health. That is a decision that should be made between a doctor and a woman as a medical choice. I said that on Fox. I said that on CNN. I said it on The View. I said it to Teen Vogue. I said it to Elle Magazine. I think anywhere you look, I've said it again and again. And it is willful ignorance or misleading lies that change what I've said. But what I've also always said is that there should not be arbitrary timelines set by men who do not understand biology. This is a law that tells women they have to make a decision about their pregnancy before they know they're pregnant. And in a state with 82 counties without an OBGYN, in a state where women are denied health care, when 1 out of every 5 women does not have access to medical insurance, it is a terribly dangerous.
Okay, I can't take any more of that. Okay, this is a bill that was introduced in the House last year, H.R. 619. Here's what the bill says it's going to do. To amend Title 18 United States Code to prohibit a healthcare practitioner from failing to exercise the proper degree of care in the case of a child who survives an abortion or attempted abortion. It's called the Born Alive Act. It failed. It failed because the Democratic Party will not support it, and a lot of Republicans do. So vote against all of them. Get rid of them. There is a just God. And this raises the whole issue of imprecatory prayers. So maybe it's time to pray, save them or get rid of them, Lord. I hate to say that, but I'm just telling you is that this is a stain on our country that it's allowed. So I became aware of this. There's a medical show on TV. It's in its last season, thank goodness. I think I watched it a couple times and then I said, this is just, there's better stuff to do with my time. Like midweek updates, right? And it's called New Amsterdam. It's about a women's hospital clinic in New York. So this was the last show that was aired. Season 5, episode 7, called Maybe Tomorrow. So I want you to listen to it, see the mood music and what they're doing, and then you're going to figure out what that is that they're talking about. Here we go. He's a doctor on the show. We'll find out what it is they're so upset about. Okay, so that was the opening thing of the show, because they were upset about the Dobbs decision. That didn't outlaw abortion, by the way. It gave the states the right to choose. I thought we were all about choice. It returned it to the democratic process. Some other people, they were kind of clever, so I made up a little video based on some suggestions I saw on Twitter about what else could we use these credits for? So here's another one that might work. Okay. And I love the creativity of people on the internet. Now, one of these is mine. That one's not, but here's another one. So listen, we like Elon Musk in some ways. He's buying Twitter, but this guy is a radical New Ager. He wants to put a neural chip in your brain to link it to the internet, that type of thing. Here's a picture of him. This is just from this week, his Halloween costume. It's the head of Baphomet with an upside down cross. So don't get too excited about him. He's going in, he's firing people. I don't know if they've set up crying rooms in San Francisco near headquarters for people that are getting canned. And he's cutting like half the staff. Unfortunately, he's not cutting a lot of the people that were doing content suppression and banning a lot of people. So here's mine. This is the one I made up for maybe a use of these opening credits. Okay, now listen. So here's an interesting event. Okay, so John Fetterman, who cannot function without a machine, he's like the first cyborg. I'm concerned about this. This guy has major problems, and I'm no fan of the guy that's running against him, but at least he's functioning. So here he is announcing the presence of a former president, Barack H. Obama, at his rally in Pennsylvania yesterday. And watch, this is kind of interesting.
I'm proud to be standing with a president that is 100% sedition-free.
Okay, I have to play this one again because it's kind of delicious timing.
I'm proud to be standing with a president that is 100% sedition-free.
By the way, Doug Mastriano, the Republican candidate, was speaking at a rally later, and a full rainbow appeared behind him. I don't know. So here's the last little bit of the Fox panel, and this kind of leads into my next little portion.
Before we say goodbye, I'm going to ask our great group here one more question. So raise your hands if you believe that inflation is the most important issue to you. About 5 or 6. Is crime the most important issue to you? No. What's the most important issue to you? Shout it out.
The direction of the country, the control by the left of disinformation, big tech and government working together to censor people who have a different opinion. This is un-American.
Real quick.
Okay. Enough of the plant, Tim Ryan Jr. there. So this is a great article. I don't have time to go into it. I'll talk about it more as I have time. Go to The Intercept, read this article. Leaked documents outline DHS plan, the Department of Homeland Security's plan to police disinformation. This is sort of where I got the title from today. And I didn't say that on Tuesday because I thought I would use it as a title today. So just to be clear about that, because it's something that really bothers me. And we are in a very, very difficult time. So if you go to this article, you'll find they have a lot of leaked documents that show that there was a collusion between DHS and big tech to censor people. And it's the whole thing, I guess the best thing I could say is it's out of control. So here is well, I thought I had an article here. Oh, wait, he sent it to me this way. So Glenn Greenwald, who is a writer, and I'm going to talk more about this, and this is probably going to be one of my talks in Canada next year, and I'll talk about it before then because this is a big deal. Glenn Greenwald at Substack, greenwald.substack.com, has an article called "The Consortium Imposing the Growing Censorship Regime," and then he talks about his new live program where he's going to be talking about these things. And listen, Glenn Greenwald is a person of the left. He's married to a guy. They live in a country far to the south where there have been some questions over the election. So, but I'm just telling you, he's a good thinker, and he recognizes that there's this totalitarian thing going on about disinformation and what it's leading to. So he says this, there has been some reporting by me and others on the new and utterly fraudulent disinformation industry. This newly minted self-proclaimed expertise, grounded in little more than crude political ideology, claims the right to officially decree what is true and false for purposes of, among other things, justifying state and corporate censorship of what its experts decree to be disinformation. The industry is funded by a consortium of a small handful of neoliberal billionaires. You can probably guess the name of one of them, along with US, British, and EU intelligence agencies. These government and billionaire-funded anti-disinformation groups often masquerade under benign-sounding names like the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensics Research Lab, Bellingcat, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. They are designed to cast the appearance of apolitical scholarship, but their only real purpose is to provide a justifying framework to stigmatize, repress, and censor any thoughts, views, and ideas that dissent from neoliberal establishment orthodoxy. It exists, in other words, to make censorship and other forms of repression appear to be scientific rather than ideological. And he goes on to talk about central bank digital currencies. Turkey and Japan came out this week and said they're looking into adopting central bank digital currencies, and this will incorporate a repressive regime. It will be quite bad. So here's a article. I've talked a little bit about Ukraine and Russia. Russia, now I think they've backed off on this because they got a lot of pushback on it from the world. They were going to stop the grain deal. They've had an agreement with Ukraine to allow grain from Ukraine to make it down through the Black Sea to markets. But it's not, it would have taken dozens and dozens and dozens of ships, and they're only getting, they need like a dozen ships a day, and they're getting out like one. And then they have to go to an inspection. And so when they sort of dropped this, Ukraine came out and said, we have like 100 ships waiting to be inspected, and we have 90 that just finished. So this is a big deal to feeding the world. So this is the title, Russia's ditching of the Ukraine grain deal catastrophic for poor nations. The Kremlin's announcement surprised grain traders and analysts who, while doubtful that the deal would have been renewed beyond its mid-November endpoint, had not expected a sudden termination. We'll see a substantial spike in prices as a result, said the Black Sea consultant who was looking at this. They have to go and they have to get these inspections as they make they're down through the Bosporus and the Dardanelles to get out to world markets. So it's a big problem. Russia is using Iranian drones, and I want to remind you, this is a video that was done when they attacked back in, it was either 2019 or 2020. They used drones like this to attack one of the big oil fields and terminals and refineries, the largest refinery in the world, actually, in Saudi Arabia. So this is what Russia's doing. They're using these kamikaze drones, and this is having a big impact. And one of the things that's happening is because Iran is using these drones, allowing these drones to be used in Ukraine, Iran is gathering information about how to make them better. And Russia's helping to make them better. They're putting better guidance systems on them and that sort of thing. So the question is, and so Israel's looking at this and saying, we need to be gathering intel as well. But now Russia's coming out and said, Israel, if you interfere in any way with this, any agreements we have are off. Now, Israel's been attacking Syria, Iranian shipments and that type of thing in Syria for many years now. They've thousands of attacks. They stopped for about 30 days. They resumed them recently. One of the things that happened, though, was Israel kind of backed off a little bit because Russia had given us S-300 systems to Syria. But now my understanding is Russia has withdrawn almost all of those S-300 systems, particularly the ones that would have been protecting Iranian shipment depots and airfields and that sort of thing, and they've shipped them up to Ukraine because they need them, not so much for air defense. Ukraine doesn't really have an air force, at least they're not using one. They've been using them as surface-to-surface missiles, which they really weren't designed for. And I think it shows some of the logistical problems that Russia's had with the war in Ukraine. Very interesting development. So Israel's kind of been bouncing back and forth. Are we going to help or not? And this was a report. This is in Ma'ariv, newspaper in Israel. Sources in the West reveal the huge shipment of weapons that Russia will receive from Iran, not just drones, but also missiles. This is Iran International, Iran INTL_EN. Follow it on Twitter if you have Twitter. Iran is considering supplying Russia with ballistic missiles for its war in Ukraine, in addition to drones. As I said, they've withdrawn. There's a picture of the S-300. So Israel's kind of rethinking its strategy there. And these drones are Russia and Iran. Russia denies that they're Iranian. Why? Well, because they're effective, but they're not high-tech drones. Somebody like them compared them to like a moped compared to a Harley. These are mopeds. They make a lot of noise. They carry, 70 pounds or so of explosives, and so they can cause a lot of. They cause a lot of damage. They can blow up a bridge, and and they're noisy. And part of that is the terror that they're trying to achieve by using these. And finally, this is in the Sunday Times today. Iran has come out and said those are our drones. Now I played you a clip of Khomeini's speech, I think last Sunday, where he said, we have, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, where he said, we have these scientific things and people say this and that about that and that and this and that. And it was clear that he was saying these are our drones. One other thing that's kind of interesting is that there's a undersea network of cables. A couple of these were cut near Shetland in the UK, an island, and the internet went out. This is a Financial Times editorial Saturday. Undersea cables are the West Achilles heel. And we have a lot, we're sort of better than Russia technologically in terms of how it's available to everybody in the country. But this is where Putin might do something. And there was a Russian research ship near where these cables were damaged. Now, they get damaged all the time, so who knows? There's also this report this morning that this dam that's along the Dnipro River, this reservoir behind the dam there supplies the water to Crimea. Crimea Peninsula is very dry. Since Russia's taken over in 2014, they've had pretty good water supply. Their agricultural output has gone way up. And there's been this back and forth between Ukraine and Russia over the last few weeks. You're going to blow it up. No, you're going to blow it up. Oh, you're going to blow up and say, we blew it up. No, you're going to blow it up and say, we blew it up. And it's just been this back and forth thing. So just kind of pay attention to that. Kherson is where the battle is. Putin's trying to get the civilians out of there so people think that it's going to be a big problem. Big article in the Wall Street yesterday about what happens after Putin goes away. Now, there's been a lot of reports. He's sick, he's ill, this and that. I don't know, okay? All I know is I've seen him go to these meetings where they have guys get up and drone on for speeches for 4 hours, and he sits there on the stage the whole time. So that kind of indicates to me that, well, he's not drinking anything probably, but, he's sitting there and he's engaged in the conversation. So I'm skeptical that he's seriously ill. It just doesn't seem to be, and especially now since he's got rid of that table that was about half the length of a football field where he used to meet with people. So here's a real quick thing. This is just a summary. I did a midweek update on this a little bit about the Israeli elections. This is the 5th election in 3 years. Here, these were the polls ahead of time. So they're saying Likud could get maybe about 35, Yeshati, that's Yair Lapid, the caretaker prime minister. Right now, he could get 22. This was back in July. Then these polls came out in September, where they looked at all the polls and kind of averaged them. And you can see Likud had gone down to 31. Yeshati had gone up to 23.6. And the interesting thing is, in the elections that actually took place, this was exit polls. They said Likud would get 30. Yesh Atid would get 24. They're a left-wing party. They're very tied to the media. You need to understand what's going on in Israel, is that what Netanyahu did in this campaign, and I would highly recommend you go to Caroline Glick at JNS YouTube channel or podcast and get her podcast where she talked to Gadi Tab about what happened in the election. And what Netanyahu did was he did not go to any of the mainstream outlets, the left-wing leaning mainstream media outlets. He only went to Channel 14, which is a relatively new internet, I think internet-only TV channel, which Yair Lapid and all the lefties in Israel have been trying to get shut down because it has, guess what? Election disinformation. You know, that's because it disagrees with us. And so they try to shut this down. So this was the exit polling, and it right then it looked like Netanyahu. So his parties, he would have Likud, Shas, United Torah Judaism, and the Religious Zionist Party. So that would be 14 and 7, that's 21. 10 would be 31, and 30 from Likud would be 61, which gets Netanyahu just over the thing. They have 120 seats, you need 61. But what happened was the final results came out, and I've had to change this slide about 6 times, but the Likud faction, they got 32, and they ended up with 64. And so assuming he can get the coalition, they have the negotiations that will take place over the next month to 6 weeks. They'll form a government, and that government could last for 4 years. So everything to the right, those would be people in the Likud coalition. By the way, the 5 in white, that's an Arab party. They probably won't align with anybody. There's a tremendous amount of violence and that type of thing, particularly in the Arab areas of Israel. A lot of shootings, a lot of Israeli IDF operations. It's fairly significant. They've had soldiers shot at checkpoints. I remember when Pam and I were there 5 years ago, particularly down at Hebron, as we're going into the Tomb of the Patriarchs. There, I remember the Israeli soldiers saying, "Do you have any knives on you?" And the reason they asked that, and they were up near Nablus, they were sort of interested in that type of information because soldiers have been killed, stabbed and killed at that checkpoint by Arab terrorists. So, and Hebron is a hotbed of terrorism. So that's good news. Netanyahu's in charge for a while. The question is this going to be some kind of is Netanyahu going to be able to undo the bad Israeli-Lebanon gas deal? A lot of people don't think it's a bad deal. Our government, the regime in charge of the United States, think it's just fine. You know, you got the Jake Sullivans, the Amos Hochsteins, the Wendy Shermans, the Victoria Newlands of the world. They're fine with that. They're fine. They would be fine with Israel giving up most of its land to make peace. And they want to make a deal with Iran that will give Iran maybe up to $1 trillion by 2030. Can you imagine what Iran would do with $1 trillion? Now, Iran, there's essentially a revolution going on there right now. And the question is the regime going to make it or not? So the thinking is that Netanyahu will try to undo this deal, but he won't until he gets in, gets reacclimated to the security apparatus, and he can do it without causing war with Hezbollah. And Hezbollah says this. Interesting thing is this Amos Hochstein, he had the same State Department position on energy. They call him, some places in Washington, they call him the energy whisperer because he seems to have the ear of the last president and the guy who's pretending to be president right now, probably running with the last president's direction, which is why I called it the Biden administration. And to which, when I said that, like I said, Martha McCallum's eyebrows shot up like, I can't believe you said that. And well, you shouldn't have been surprised. But so this guy, by the way, he's Jewish. He served in the IDF for 3 years. But he's trying to make this deal. There's also this article, let's see, where is this? Oh, it's in Haaretz today or Friday, that the negotiator for Lebanon is married to an entertainer who came to Israel and actually sang in Israel a song about how great Lebanon is and the resistance and that type of thing. And her husband is the main negotiator for Lebanon. So it's, they always seem to be related. The UN has a commission on inquiry, which has released a report. The Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Ambayevsky wrote a great article about that, it's just a master, she said, it's a masterpiece of modern anti-Semitism. The UN General Assembly this week, in one of its meetings, they voted on a resolution, you see it there, C.177/L2, and it was about the risk of nuclear proliferation in the Middle East, but there's only one country who anybody thinks has nuclear weapons in the Middle East, it's Israel. And so the result of the vote was 152 in favor of making Israel give up its nuclear weapons, 5 against. Israel, the United States, Canada, interestingly enough, Micronesia, and Palau. So great test, take it home to your kids and say, hey, can you locate Micronesia and Palau on a map? So that was the end of that vote. And now they're having this big, this week, COP27. It's the Council of Peoples, I think is what COP stands for. They had COP26. Remember, that was where Prince Charles gave the speech in Glasgow, Scotland last fall, a year ago, where he said that, we need a military-style campaign led by someone with trillions at his disposal. And so everybody's like, what did he really mean by that? And I played the clip of that. Don't have time to play it this morning. That's taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh. But look at the imagery of what they're doing. Do you see what that is there to the left of COP27? Here's a bigger picture of it. It's a sun god. This is a religion that they're using. Here's another logo, Sharm el-Sheikh. It's down on the down along the Gulf of Aqaba, and so they have all these things. Like, for example, they have this Earth Charter has like 10 commandments because it's a religion. Sunak is not going. Prince Charles is not going. I think he really would like to. Sunak has also said we're not going to move our embassy to Jerusalem. Things are not going to go well for the UK, I think, because they did that. A lot of things going on. Ukraine war and energy crisis will be big topics there. But one of the things that's going to make its appearance, this thing has been around for about 21 years now. It's called the Ark of Hope. And it has different panels. Now, do you understand? Was there another religion that had an ark? Okay, so this has water, air, spirit, fire, earth. This was made up by some lady in Vermont, and this is what the ark looks like, the different panels on it, representing different aspects of things, and spirit, and then I think this is the lid. And they put this earth charter in it, in the ark, just like Moses put the 10 Commandments in the true ark. Here's some pictures from the ceremony in Vermont back in 2001, where they dedicated this monstrosity. And you see them dancing around it, worshiping. I mean, this is a religion. Another thing that's happening, activists plead for water as largest wetland ecosystem in the Middle East dries rapidly. This has, excuse me, this has Bible prophecy implications because this is the wetlands is at the end of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers in Iraq. It's drying up. And I've talked about this for years. Because of reduced flows, Turkey has a bunch of dams. The water's not getting there. Drought has been happening. And so these people who live in the wetlands, they're farmers. And, farming without water is not a very sustainable thing. So they're having to leave. So this is going to be a big deal at COP27, dark shadows, and understand that right across the strait from where Sharm el-Sheikh is this thing that they're working on, NEOM. And they just had a big conference in Saudi Arabia, and NEOM came up. And this is interesting as I was researching it. So Imagination creates Saudi Arabia's first music streaming channel. And what do they call it? Beast TV. Now, sometimes I wonder, are they doing this because they're inspired by the father of lies, and they're really helping Bible prophecy unfold, or do they know what we believe and they're just trolling us for fun? I kind of think it's the former, not the latter. So here's some more pictures. This is NEOM, 1,500 feet each side, 200 or 300 meters across. Here's a video when NEOM was introduced.
For too long, humanity has existed within dysfunctional and polluted cities that ignore nature. Now, a revolution in civilization is taking place. Imagine a traditional city and consolidating its footprint, designing to protect and enhance nature. The line will be home to 9 million residents and will be built with a footprint of just 34 square kilometers. And we are designing it to provide a healthier, more sustainable quality of life. The line's communities are organized in 3 dimensions. Residents have access to all their daily needs within 5-minute walk neighborhoods. And the line's infrastructure makes it possible to travel end to end in 20 minutes with no need for cars, resulting in 0 carbon emissions. By leveraging AI technology, services are autonomous, saving you time and effort. Designed by world-leading architects, the line is 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, 170 kilometers long, and housed within an elegant mirror glass facade. Intelligent solutions create efficiency and year-round temperate microclimate with natural ventilation. Energy and water supplies are 100% renewable. The line is designed as a series of unique communities, offering a wealth of amenities, providing equitable views and immediate access to the surrounding nature. With 40% of the world accessible within 6 hours, at the heart of the globe's key trade routes, a place for commerce and communities to thrive like nothing on Earth seen before. The Line, the city that delivers new wonders for the world.
Now, it's interesting, it has sort of a comparison to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and it's being built. Okay, so look, is this the final Babylon that's going to be in the end times? I don't know. I'm just saying it's actually being built. And listen, it's got golf. I mean, I know that would indicate that it's part of the beast system to some people, but they're building it. These are some recent pictures. Here's a drone video of, well, I thought I had a drone video of it. Let me go back one. Was it this one? I guess I just took screenshots. But, so you can see the line, right? And by the way, this crosses the mountain range where a lot of people believe the real Mount Sinai is. By the way, they're having a ceremony at the traditional Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula this week as part of that climate conference. So the mirrored walls, I wonder, is this going to be named the world's dead bird sanctuary? 'Cause I think some birds are going to be flying into that thing. But, it was kind of interesting. I'm sitting here like, okay, so I'm going to bank it off apartment 38C and onto the green. You got to call your bank shots, I guess, at this golf course. And so they're building it. This is an interesting thing. Just a couple things real quick and I'm done, really. Iron ore prices are going way up or are buckling. They're falling because China's not ordering iron ore. Do you know China was ordering about half of the iron ore on the planet? And they were making about 70% of the steel to build in their industry. But what's happening in China? Their population has stopped growing. It's going to collapse. That makes them very dangerous, I think, because they want to preserve their legacy. There was an article, I can't remember where I saw it off the top of my head, about Japan. Japan's missing villages. Japan's population is declining. It declined 1 million people last year, could go down another 4 or 5 million this year because of demographics. And what's happening is these villages, they're disappearing. There's nobody who lives in them. Japan currently has housing stock unoccupied of 11 million units, which is the same as the amount of housing stock in the entire country of Australia. That's what they have unoccupied so far. There were other articles about this a number of years ago where Russia, because of its demographic decline, a lot of its rural villages are dying out. They're just disappearing. There's nobody left because all the young people went to the city. And so we live at this time of economic demographic collapse. This is an article from South Korea. North Korea shot about 23 missiles over there. And then South Korea is also doing a delay. They're not getting their big battery manufacturer, but they're not entering into deals to get the battery mines going in Australia. They don't want to own them. It's interesting. In this article, it says that they need, I think it was this article, they need 345 new mines to get the materials for batteries. So this Tim Ryan acolyte on our panel, go read this article. You're all about the earth and green. 345 mines to get your batteries, my friend. Oh, there'll be a lot of jobs. Yeah, but I thought you were all about green energy, not that pollution. And then this one, I'll finish with this. Article, editorial in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. The big one is coming. A U.S. flag officer talks candidly about the fading U.S. deterrent. We're in a very volatile world. And the question is, China wants to do this, North Korea wants to do this, Russia's doing this, Turkey's rising up. There's a video from a Turkish program a couple of years ago, and they had this, they took this Stratfor article showing, hey, this is what Turkey's influence might look like by 2050. Now, Erdogan sees that and he says, that's what we want to run. That's the area we want to run. And look at where it's centered. Kind of interesting. So anyway, we'll talk more about the Israeli election and another update. So interesting times, man. All this stuff happening all at once. Pray for the elections. I am not naive enough to think that Republicans take control of the House and Senate. It's let's just put it this way. If they do, it's going to be the fight of everybody's lives for the next couple of years. It's not going to be a pretty thing to watch. But it needs to be done, might improve things a little bit. Ultimately, though, I think Jesus is coming back, and that's what I'm looking for, So we should all be looking for that. So let's pray. Lord, pray that you'll bless our time this week. Bless us this week. Pray you'll give us opportunities to share the gospel. Help us always to keep in mind that we need to live as people of God, committed to the word and the truth of the word and upholding the standards that it sets forth. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.